Welcome back to the History of Automation podcast and show. My name is Shawn Tierney, and along with my co-hosts Jeremy and Gary, we'd like to ask you before we get into the show if you've been enjoying these episodes and if you think we should continue it in 2026. Now, it's quite a time investment every Sunday to meet with people and to recruit people and to interview them and then to edit and upload it. And so we want to make sure that if we're doing this, that there's an audience out there who wants to hear this every couple of weeks. And so we're asking you to place your votes. You go to givesendgo.com/automation museum, and you can make a donation like $5, $10, or $20 if you'd like to see us continue in 2026. And if we get no votes, that's okay too, right? Maybe the timing isn't right for an automation museum. But if you're enjoying the interviews we're doing with some of the legends in our industry about some of the products, the creation of some of the products that we all use and love on a daily basis, well, then please consider going over to givesendgo.com/automation museum and help us raise enough funds to get this nonprofit off the ground. And either way, I want to wish you all good health and happiness. And now let's go ahead and get into this week's episode of the History of Automation. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the History of Automation podcast. My name is Shawn Tierney, and I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Gary Wilkinson and Jeremy Pollard. And you don't know this, but they already said hi and introduced themselves because the software was not recording yet. So this week, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at DOS-based programming packages for Allen Bradley. And the reason we're doing this is because, the PLC came out in like 69 and that late 60s, early 70s. Mm-hmm. And then we had networking hit the plant floor, PLC networks, especially good networks in late 70s, like Modbus and Data Highway. But also around the same time, we had the birth of the personal computers. I had a VIC-20. We had Apple IIs at school. My mother had a TI-99A. And it was just an explosion in the late 70s, early 80s of computers. A lot of them ran BASIC. But what really changed was when they all moved to DOS, whether it was the IBM PC or the Compaqs or the Gateways or the Dells or even Tandy's ran DOS, right? So that was a huge upgrade, and that allowed anybody to write software that could work on a number of different machines, and it really changed the world. So much so, especially in automation, that in 1986, and tell me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, when Rockwell released the PLC-5, it was software programming only. You could not grab your T3 or T4 or T5. Very true. And program it, right? Like you would with your PLC-2 and your PLC-3.
Yeah, it was T50.
Yeah, there was that was a DOS-based computer. There was the T45, the T47. I had all three. And but yeah, the T3, which is probably most people know from the PLC2 days, was a luggable. It was a big electronic CRT with a membrane keyboard, and it was nothing like programming with a PC. I'll just put it that way, right? And so think of a programming terminal. If you ever used a programming terminal, it was a big honking programming terminal. So with that said, I want to go to Jeremy and have you kind of give us a little bit of lay of the land, because and they didn't hear this. So if you could go again, how you got involved with one of these software-based companies. If you go through that story again, because I know we missed that in the pre-show.
Yeah, no worries. Excuse me. Again, back in 85-ish, I was at a PLC specialist conference in Highland Heights, Ohio, when they introduced the 6200 series software for PLC-5, IPDS, and they had it running on computers with expanded memory because it needed 2 megs of expanded memory to run. And had all kinds of trouble getting it running, just period. And this was a demonstration at the front of the conference hall. So not everybody had a computer, but you could go up and fool around with it. Mm-hmm. I think they got it working, but I honestly can't remember. But it was back in the initial days of DOS, where it was a 640K memory limit. And in order to get extra memory requirements for software, you had to either use an extended or an expanded memory manager like QEMM or something like that. And they were just having all kinds of problems with it. But it piques your interest, because what programming software did for the PLC world was open it up to many programming individuals, shall we say. And the IBM PC and the use of Microsoft DOS as opposed to CPM created an environment for people to start developing stuff. And so back in the good old days in 85, 86, 87, 88 is when there was a plethora, that's a nice word, of third-party programming packages, Teledecan Resources, ICOM, Taylor Software, ProDoc, UpDoc, Graysoft. I think I said Taylor already. DMC for Modicon came out. There was a couple of differences in somewhat of the operating systems. Some ran under VMS on the VAX for DEC. And when I left Allen Bradley, I went to Durham College for a year because I thought training was and teaching was where it was at. I lasted a year in that environment. It just wasn't dynamic enough, shall we say. And I became the Canadian sales representative, if you will, for Teledecan Resources. So in order to be an expert in what it is that you're selling, you also need to know your competition. So I was very, very friendly with the Allen Bradley distribution network in Canada. And Neil Taylor was a Canadian, so I got a copy of Neil's software. I had a copy of ICOM, of course, had a copy of Allen Bradley, and really got to know them. And I created in the early 90s when I moved back, one step behind. I went from being the Canadian sales rep for Teledecan, and in 88 became the product manager for their programming products done in Houston.
Oh, okay.
So my knowledge of everybody really allowed me to be a good contributor to the advancement of the product.
Now, I want to ask a question right there. So when I got into the business in 1990, I thought the only people who are going to make programming software for Allen Bradley PLCs is going to be Allen Bradley. I mean, and I was so surprised to see all these other companies had jumped in and were making programming software for the, I mean, it wasn't, those days were not like today where everybody has their own version of X, Y, and Z. Everybody rolls their own version of Unix, right? It was all Linux, right? And so I was just so surprised. Could you put us back into those late 80s? I know there was a huge market for programming software, just like there was a huge market for these new things called PCs. But there was just so many different companies doing it. Can you explain a little bit about that, especially as a product manager at that point now for a software company? What was the environment like? What was causing that? That just everybody jumping in and trying to write software to program these PLCs.
I believe it was more of a sort of renaissance in the fact that we've got a personal computer, we've got a guy that can actually write code, drink Jolt Cola, eat pizza, put him in the back of a room, and create something. And I think it was also very lucrative because Allen Bradley, when they were selling their IPDS software, the software was not cheap.
No,
like it was upwards of $6,000 to $8,000.
Typically $3,300 for the PLC5 software.
That's
started. Yeah, yes, Canadian net is about 6 or 7, but
yeah. So at the end of the day, everything was feature driven. So what doesn't 6200 have? And just to use online editing for an example, it didn't have online editing, and I can't remember if it actually did or it didn't. I'm sure that it did, but so the third-party guys would come up with a way of doing online editing. So the problem with Rockwell or Allen Bradley at the time, the big company mindset, things don't happen very quickly. They're not very agile, if you will. The small companies, especially ICOM, and Teledecan and Taylor to some degree, once somebody came out with a feature, then 3 weeks later, the next guy had it, that kind of thing. So it was a bit of a hop, skip, and a jump going through the 3-4 years where everybody sort of made headway against each other, and everybody was climbing the same mountain. And then it happened in 89, I believe, is when Rockwell or Allen Bradley was trying to create software for PLC2 and PLC3. And what they did is they licensed the ICOM software for PLC2, and they licensed the Teledec and TopDoc software for PLC3. And the sales for the PLC3 software went through the roof. They sold like 250 copies in 3 months, and you're looking at $10,000, $12,000 a copy. It's quite a good, interesting influx of revenue. While Allen Bradley was working on their own, because they wanted to have the catchphrases back then was multi-file editors, common user interface, right, between all 3 packages or all 3 platforms. And then the ability to have a function key or a keyboard sequence common throughout PLC2, PLC3, and PLC5.
Absolutely. And they got to that too. I mean, if you were to pull up 6200 for the 2, 3, and 5, and for the 500 later on, right? Because the 500's 1990, 89, 90. Yeah. They really looked identical. It was, the learning curve was, and granted, the PLC2 is a much different animal than the 5, but the 5 and the 500 are very similar. And there was so much commonality. F5, who active, and, I also think one of the strange things was they would actually sell you either the online software or the offline software or a bundle. Right. And I just, going back, I think that's kind of odd. I guess because it was so very expensive that maybe you had engineers who only needed the offline software so they could save some money. But the prices seemed really inflated.
But there was a demarcation point between development and maintenance, right? You may have 10 guys developing code and you need 10 offline licenses, but you've only got 2 laptops on the floor, so you only need 2 online. So it was definitely a dollar and cent decision making, if you will. And by buying both, the vendor would probably make an extra $1,500 on the bundle, but it's $1,500 that they wouldn't have made otherwise. So the bundles were really attractive from a price perspective.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm trying to remember when, because ICOM really set the bar for features as moving forward into the early 90s. And I'm trying to remember, and they got the Allen Bradley distribution networks, right? The distributors, they got them on board.
Yes.
And ICOM was the preferred vendor. So that's one of the reasons why ProDoc's no longer around, UpDoc's no longer around. I think Taylor got bought by somebody and is just integrated into somewhere. Graysoft disappeared. DMC's disappeared. Yep. Because it became David and Goliath scenario. And Rockwell or Allen Bradley saw that. And then ICOM was starting to eat their lunch. Mm-hmm. So they bought them.
Well,
I don't remember when that was.
And it was mid-90s, and I can tell you a whole story about that. But, what we found was the Rockwell guys would come in, I'm talking early 90s, they'd come in and say, you shouldn't sell ICOM. You get 6200. Mm-hmm. We're like, okay, yeah. Go tell your biggest customers. And he's like, well, you convince your customer that they don't want it. Because if they say they like it over your product, then who are we to tell them what to do? And we had a couple of red-faced Rockwell personnel come back from meeting the customers and saying, yeah, we're not gonna make you stop selling it.
No, again, it was customer driven. Yeah. And you go to the IPC show in Detroit, and all of the software people would be there. And I commend Steve Burt, who was one of the marketing guys, and Eric Noreen, those two guys created some really innovative marketing functions at these shows. And one was a calendar of a shelf with ICOM software on it. And there's a young lady, and she's reaching for one of these pieces of software. And the caption on the calendar was, oh, damn. Looks
good.
looks
Feels
good,
great.
feels great.
Yep.
I think is what the caption was.
Looks good, feels great, and pretty woman on a poster.
Yeah.
I think I have one here that's, I wouldn't say it's 100% safe for work or for the under 13 crowd anyways, but in a role somewhere that has the same icon software, looks good and feels great, and they would put a pretty woman on the poster, and of course the guys like to see the pretty woman. A lot of them didn't know what icon was, but they were like, no, I should have. And of course they were fully dressed. We're not talking about pinups from girly magazines.
The other thing that Steve Burke did was he put all the ICOM guys in golf shirts instead of shirt and tie.
Oh, you were saying that. That's right.
That started that trend in industrial shows where, casual wear was okay. And, when Wonderwear came to town and Object Automation and these guys, they would have branded golf shirts.
Yeah.
And that was considered okay. You didn't have to have a suit and jacket anymore.
Now, before we get into the mega spreadsheet that you put together comparing some of these DOS-based packages from the 80s, I want to go to Gary for a minute. And so, Gary, I know when you started at Triconics, it was mid-90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did you learn about their history with programming software? Were they always, what were they running on? Was it Windows? Was it Unix? Was it DOS?
Sure, I came in at just the most exciting time. I was actually probably mid-career, and I didn't know what the process automation industry was, but they saw the people interviewed me at Triconics. This guy has been doing this. He knows where the controller is. He knows the programming, knows technology. We could train him. And they later told me, we'll give him about a year. They were a small company and a go-go company, and I looked like Mr. Reliable, and I would be a little more serious. Amazing time. So it was 100% DOS, but what they brought me in for was the beginning of this strange new product called IEC 1131-3 compliant Windows-based software. And it's an amazing time because it was a hardware company, sort of like Sun Microcomputers, if you remember that. But they started a project with software. And I remember the discussions, well, should we charge for this thing? Well, let's just give it away. Well, wait a minute. We've never made money on software before. Let's charge $5,000. I remember those discussions. But it was the transition from DOS to Windows, 95, 96, in the PLC industry. And so I was teaching DOS for the next 10 or 15 years, but that percentage went really down. And because it was Triconics had already established a number one hardware position, people took our phone calls and we'll try this Windows stuff. And there was a lot of enthusiasts. And I was just there at the right time to see it take off, that transition from DOS. So I learned Windows-based programming before I learned DOS-based programming. One of the few, and that was interesting and amazing because the fundamentals are the same, right? Especially for our industry. If you could say, Shawn, you just mentioned Scott Paper because that was the smokestack that was outside my window where I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now it's still there actually in Chester, Pennsylvania, called Kimberly-Clark.
Yeah.
It just shows you the amazing scope of our industry. I'm more the oil and gas guy because they have the money. But of course, like our guest we had a couple weeks ago, all the different aspects of auto industry, things like that. But Triconics was really, the oil and gas was just so lucrative and kind of the customer. Wonderwear had no restrictions. If you had a supermarket, if you had a prison, literally, candy shop, oil and gas. Yeah, that was their success. Long answer to a short question. I tend to be long-winded, but thanks for the opportunity. Amazing.
Yeah, and as we said in previous episodes, Windows 95 was the catalyst to making Windows not only explode, but also mass adoption. People were you didn't find a lot of people had Windows 3.1 in their homes. You did a lot more than 2.0 or 1.0 for sure. Windows 3X was very popular, but the explosion of consumer, like not the geeky nerdy people, but everybody and their brother having, kind of like we see the iPhone and comparable Androids bringing the smartphones, because there were smartphones, believe it or not, before iPhone. I have people argue with me all the time. It's like, it was the first smartphone. Oh my word, please stop. But anyways, how the iPhone and its competitors, the Android or Droid, brought the smartphones to the masses, right? Where before it was a very glitchy, techie thing. That's what Windows 95 did. It just exploded. Everybody had to have it. It was so easy to use. But DOS, I mean, it was just, we're going back a decade, and it was just something that it meant getting rid of, programming your PLC with something akin to a ATM machine, that had, so many fixed buttons. It wasn't A through Z. It was like, you have all these instructions and you can put them in any order you want until you reach the limit of how many instructions you can have on a branch or on a rung or so yeah, it was like felt like real programming. You had a cursor and you could save, you could print, you could copy and paste. So I think now would be a good time, Jeremy, if you're okay with this, for me to bring in your awesome spreadsheet.
Absolutely. Just a bit of history on that one too, because after I came back from Houston and came back to Canada, which was a family decision, I was doing systems integration work and project work, writing code, HMI, SCADA, PLC stuff. And I thought to myself, well, I wonder, could I get published by doing anything? And there was a Canadian magazine that I started writing a PLC tip column for.
Nice.
And in one of those columns, I was comparing different software packages, feature for feature, but it was 700 words, right? So, and it's kind of like, well, if I know all of these guys, maybe what I can do is throw together a spreadsheet and then thinking about, well, would somebody spend $10 to buy it, So anyway, so off I went, and I took the three main ones, which would be Telenaken, ICOM, and Allen Bradley, and went through all of the software features and created a bullet point for each feature. So if Allen Bradley had it, it was there. Like the one that we're showing right there right now, file types, can use files in the processor directly. And if I could remember exactly why that is a bullet point, I would say so, but I can't. But Telenaken and ICOM did not have that feature, but Allen Bradley did. So, when I created the spreadsheet, it was more about trying to identify for somebody who's trying to figure out which software to go with. It's a comparison tool. And I met Michael Babb from Control Engineering magazine at one of the IPC shows, and told him that I had this, and he said, well, I'd love to publish it. So back in 92, I think it was, I sent it to him. I wrote a little blurb on it. He included part of the spreadsheet, and that was my first U.S. publishing credential, if you will, at that point. And I'm not quite sure how useful it really was to anybody. But it was handy for me to go through each of the products and try to figure out, you break them apart, or you take them apart, if you will, and then figure out exactly what's going on with all the main functions of a programming package, right? Online forcing, online editing, documentation, offline program control, networking issues, communication issues, even the manual. I went through the manuals of all of them to see how much time and effort was put into creating the manuals. And a lot of times the manuals were done by the training staff, if you will, too. So, yep.
Yeah, I'm just going through this. A lot of this has to do with reporting. So printing out the because I mean that was your documentation. A lot of times that would be sitting because you wouldn't have a floppy disk or something like that. You'd have a printout you'd have a complete report, probably in a 3-ring binder, as your documentation for the machine, and you'd have this for the PLC. And so the reports and the report features were very important. But as we scroll through here, we're just seeing, so many things we take for granted today. And I have to say today, I think most manufacturers make their own programming software. You don't have these third parties anymore that I'm aware of for like Control Logics or for Modicon or for, Schneider products, but and Siemens products. But this was a brand new thing, having programming software for PLCs, and
it was.
You had all these companies saying we can do it as good or better, and it was expensive software. So there was, I mean, you say 250 packages doesn't sound like a lot, but at $5 or $10 a piece, and especially if you only have a small team of 4 or 5 people, that's some serious money. And the software drives sales today. Software does drive hardware sales. I think we can say that.
Yeah, it does. And part of the sort of the platform of talking to a customer is about how much money you could save by using this software because of the development tools that are available to you. Like right now, we think of writing code in Excel and just importing the thing because of the array properties that you have with Excel. You can create 100 rungs to control fresh air units like that and import the whole thing without actually having to use the programming software to get there. So I mean, these sorts of tools that could save you some money because it saves you time and reduces the typing errors. And I don't know about you, Shawn, but every time that I did something on the T3, and I'm sitting there going, okay, I've got now 250 rungs in there. Which address did I not put in properly? Because you're just maybe you hit the button twice or that kind of stuff.
Or they want to change something. Let's say, I gave you the old drawings. The new drawings have the inputs coming to these different IO addresses. You're like, what? I have to go through 250 lines and manually change one at a time each address. Yeah. That would be a lot of coffee for me.
It would be. I look at the common software approach today, and I don't really think that there's a lot of features other than Windows features versus DOS features. But I think most of the actual editing features and the things that you can do in an RS-5000 program, if you will, not all of the DOS-based features are in RS Logix 5000. There's some that are missing, and there was one feature that ICOM had that RS Logix 5 and 500 should have had, but they didn't have. And to this day, they still don't have it. And you'd think I would remember what that would be, but I can't. But all I know is that it just isn't there. And it's a very common function that people used in ICOM software because nobody else had it. So
I know another feature people liked about ICOM was the dot commands, where you could press the period on your keyboard and you could type a couple of letters and it would go someplace right away. Yeah. It's almost like a quick shortcut to someplace else. Yeah. So if you wanted to go to the database, you wanted to go to, program routine 5, you could just hit dot, boom, boom, boom. And I never used it enough to learn the dot commands, but we used to hand out one of the most popular things with the little guides, dot command guides. Yeah. that were like a little trifold that people could put on their desks, and they love that. The downside with Icon being a small company, they would rev a lot because they would find bugs.
Right.
Well, I had one customer, I think he's since passed away, but Jerry was just the funniest guy, smart too. And one day I went into his office and he's like, "Yeah, I had to put the icon over there in the corner." He's like, I got a batch of bad software." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "I got a batch of bad software, so it's in the corner." Like, I'm like,
Wow.
"But they were revving it." So like people would call up with a bug and they would rev the software and send them a new set of floppy disks.
Yeah.
So that can be good and bad, right? And so earlier we were talking about how I don't take every Windows update that comes out. Because I've had Windows updates break my system and not be able to work. So yeah, when I latch on to something, thank goodness for VMware. I just learned that VMware Workstation Pro is now free for home use. Now this is right on their website. I haven't tried to use it because I don't have any reason to use it for personal use, but I did want to share that with the audience. But thank God for VMware because you can just go back to a snapshot. But any idea what that feature was though, Jeremy? As I was talking, nope.
No, I wish I could remember, but I really, really can't. It was too long ago.
Hey guys, I'm just breaking in here. I hope you're enjoying this week's show. I just wanted to remind you that we're asking you to vote with your wallets. If you want to see us keep giving up our Sundays to do this, we'd be happy to. We love doing it. We got some great people lined up for 2026. But we're going to need you to vote to let us know that you want us to do that. And the way you vote is you go to givesendgo.com/automation museum and you make a $5, $10, or $20 donation. If we can get up to, I think it's like $800 to actually file the paperwork for the nonprofit, we'll try to do it ourselves and to save money if that's all we can raise. Then yeah, we'll keep it going in 2026. We actually have some great guests lined up for the show. But we need you to vote. We need you to vote and let us know you want us to continue doing it. And because we love doing it, but we just want to make sure we're spending our time someplace where people think it's valuable. So again, if you want to see the History of Automation podcast and show, continue to go. If you'd like to see the Automation Museum become a reality, please visit givesendgo.com/automation museum and place your vote with a $5, $10, or $20 donation. And we appreciate it. We appreciate it. And again, we'll continue to bring you this show if you think this is something valuable. In any case, I do want to wish you all good health and happiness. And now we'll return to the rest of this week's episode of the History of Automation podcast and show. I think it's also funny too, because I don't think any of these people who make, like, I don't think the Rockwell people look at the Siemens software. And I don't think the Siemens people look at the Rockwell software. As somebody who's using multiple packages like CodeSys and other packages, as well as Rockwell and Siemens, I get really frustrated that I can't just paste in tags. Like I just ran into this weekend because I'm updating my training course. I could not just copy and paste my tags from Excel into Studio 5000. I'm like, we're on version 38. Shouldn't this have been a feature by now?
Yeah,
I'm like, I could do that in Siemens. How come I can't? And maybe I was doing something wrong, but I tried 5 ways from Sunday before I ended up exporting, editing the CSV, bringing the CSV, bringing one line into Excel, duplicating that 100 times, and then putting in my stuff and then bringing it back in. But it's like,
right.
But yeah, so it does seem like there is I guess if you already have a plant full of Rockwell, you really don't care what the other people have for features and vice versa. But back in the day, back when you created the spreadsheet, everybody was, and I think that's one of the blessings of competition, right? Everybody was trying to have the best package. Now we just get what we get and we don't get upset.
And I think too, Shawn, the real level of competition back in the late 80s, it was fast and furious. And in the the start to the 90s as well, because you sold your software on features.
Yeah.
And this is why we're better than the next guy. So you had to have all of the features. And one of the features that we put into TopDoc was the ability to assemble a single run. And because you either had to assemble all the edits or no edits, right? So if you cancel edits, you cancel all the edits. If you assemble the edits, you assemble them all. And I asked the question, Dick Hollenbeck was the president, if you will, chief cook and bottle washer. And I said, Dick, is there any way that we can actually assemble one run specifically? You know, we've got 5 runs that we've edited, but we only want to accept one because it's tested fine. Can we do that? Next day, done.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like it just needed somebody to come up with, think out of the box a little bit, and can we do this? And we there was something in the PLC 5 that allowed you to do it, but you need to have you had to go underneath the lid to figure it out. But in the PLC 2, it was either all or none. But he figured out a way to do something called a read, modify, write command on an individual run in PLC 2, which is like, well, this is great. That's it. Again, it's a selling feature.
Yeah.
The ability to use a serial port direct connect to a PLC 2 instead of having a board as opposed to anything else. It was a serial cable.
What was the PLC 2? Was that 422? I don't remember. I don't remember. Usually we would have a smart cable from ICOM, a PLC 2 smart cable.
There were smart cables, and I think I'm trying to visualize the circuitry because there's a couple of transistors in there. It uses the power supply from the serial port. And maybe it sets it out to I'd be lying if I said I could remember it properly.
Well, we want to invite anybody who's watching who remembers these type of details to come on, because we'd love to pest you with questions. But I think a lot of PCs, their serial ports weren't just RS-232, but some were. And so, people would just assume that, hey, this is just only RS-232. Therefore, you need a converter to go from 232 to 422 or 485. And a lot of serial ports, especially on earlier models, had that multi-function capability. But I guess, the farther we went on, I think especially with laptops, we were just using them as 232 only.
Yeah, I can't remember what the voltage was that was being used on the 2. Gone with the Wind.
Yeah. And I want to bring Gary back in here. Does any of this sound, any of these, of course, Triconics, I don't think there was anybody else writing software for it. That's kind of a safety industry, right? Or, uptime, 100% uptime industry. But were you seeing the same things when you started there? Were these conversations going on like this about features, functions?
Yeah. Again, just a matter of being in the right place at the right time with the programming and the DOS. Actually, have here when I get my fuzzy screen fixed, I'll show you this. This quick reference guide for DOS programming is just gold. I can't believe it's still gold. And so all those features that Jeremy and yourself were going over, the Alt Shift command is right there, and they're just so valuable. If you go in many plants worldwide, you'll have these quick guides, and Windows just changed the game. So Shawn, it was your example that finding I just went to the CSV file, made the changes there, re-imported. It was just so embedded to us, and Windows just learned a lot, and it was kind of one of those things. That's why I hope we dedicate a series to IEC 1131, how industries just attach themselves to these. IEC would do this work, and wow, you're IEC certified. Wow. And Triconics was always grabbing that stuff, the certification. So I gave you a long, indirect answer to a short, distinct question. But I was just thinking, let's make the IEC 1131 special -3 a separate show. Just the amazing things that it does. And what was, if I just may linger, a big part of the software business, and Triconics is a hardware company, but we'll take the services money.
Yep.
Upgrading your DOS to Windows, which even could be another topic. And I was just lucky enough to be in that business of knowing it, the conversion of DOS programs to Windows, because these, the big money companies really don't like to shut down. You really need a good reason to for Exxon. Sure, we'll take a couple weeks off. Yeah, you obviously they're going to wait for turnarounds and things like that, and so I drifted off there because the subject is just so fascinating.
Yeah, I want to ask you. So you were training on the Windows software as it was coming out.
Absolutely, yeah.
Did you find a lot of people after going through your class being like, "I don't want to change from DOS"?
Yes, very much. And our company made a decision, so I'll be here. But the first year and maybe the first 5 years, well, we'll test it out. We'll try this Windows thing, and of course, because let's say the higher level or the more critical the industry, the more critical safety, the more critical downtime, and things like that. That's generic to every single industry. And so we got to the time that, we do have a turnaround coming in, 18 months, which we'd love to make 24 months, which we'd love to make 3 years. All that sort of things. And Triconics was just very embedded with those industries because that's how it started. And obviously, but I've been in Procter & Gamble, paper mills and Kimberly-Clark paper mills. And that wasn't the real goal for Triconics. It was, of course, the oil companies. But yeah, fascinating. But the conversions, the upgrade from DOS to Windows was such a fascinating business, and very interesting.
I did run into a lot of people. I did run into a lot of really heavy programmers. People are programming, like that was most of their job, writing programs. They did not want to jump on the Windows version of the Allen Bradley programming software right away. They felt clicking and dragging and dropping was so much slower than typing. It is. It definitely is. And so there was a lot of resistance with the early, and I'm thinking to WinLogix 5, which would be the first Windows, and tell me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, but I think that was the first Windows programming software for Allen Bradley. That was from ICOM, and they eventually bought them. They had a whole intelligence suite. I think it was just genius. I got to go get my old flyers for this, but just genius how they came out with the suite of Windows products. But WinLogix 5, that's where the name Logix comes from. It's from WinLogix 5. And, I think there was, did you see, and how, it doesn't seem like all these old DOS companies, it seems like they just all faded away, except for ICOM, they all got out of the business. Jeremy, was that because Windows development was just too expensive, or what were your ideas about what happened? Because like you said, there was like 6 or 7 of them who were making programming software for.
There was, and they. I'm trying to remember what happened with Taylor, but I think when ICOM went to Windows and ICOM got bought, and now ICOM had a PLC 3 package, and the software component of Rockwell was formed by the purchase of ICOM. I think that many sort of saw the writing on the wall. Teledenken still went on, but I know for a fact that as soon as Allen Bradley came out with their own PLC 3 package through ICOM, the PLC 3 sales at Teledenken went down through the floor.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So people want to buy from the vendor. If you've got a product that's good enough, then that's how they're going to go. And
Really, to ask a question, or Jack, what time frame did Rockwell purchase ICOM?
I think it was 95, 96.
I think it was 94, 95.
Nice. Okay.
I think,
but yes, definitely mid 90s. And
so I jumped in on that comment because, of course, Triconics was for sale to the highest bidder. That very time, I remember one by one, Honeywell made a low bid, and I'm not exposing any secrets here. Well, maybe a few. Rockwell certainly would have loved to fit Triconics and change the name from Triconics to Rockwell.
Mhm.
But I believe their purchase of ICOM actually was not an insignificant part of the bidding process there. Iconics was, especially we're spending money on that. So that time period was just very interesting. And
Well, the early 90s, Gary, was revolutionary. You know, with Windows 95 coming, Windows 3.1, 3.11 already in the books, it got people thinking about, well, maybe there's something to this Windows thing. And Wonderware, of course, basically said, yes, there's a lot to have been doing with this Windows thing. And people started to generate code and products based upon Windows 3.1 and 3.11 and through networking and NetDDE and all this stuff. And they got used to it. So when Windows 95 came and it reached commercial success, people started asking about Windows-based products. And it's kind of like, well, no, we only have DOS. Well, you got to get your ass together.
Well, and
this is coming.
Well, and I think, I looked it up and the internet says 94. Rockwell purchased ICOM. This is also during the period where they purchased Reliance Electric, which is there back in the day, and almost purchased Triconics. But
yes, they made a bid, but it was low.
And they would go on to buy ICS Triplex, I believe.
Yeah.
Years later.
Yes.
Right. And
is that Montreal?
I don't remember.
ICS Triplex?
Maybe.
They were one of the 3 TMR vendors. August Systems was first. ICS was second.
Sorry, I was thinking about somebody else. It was
Uniform Triconics was third.
Yeah. So what ICOM had done with their intelligence series, having a suite of products, like it wasn't just like Wonderware. They had their WinView, which competed with Wonderware. I wouldn't say it was a heavy competitor because of some of the animations was not, I would say, next gen, like Windows 3.1 gen, but it was a decent package. But they had a phenomenal trending and data logging package called WinTrend, WinTrend. And then they had WinLinks was those, the single communication driver. If you use any Rockwell today, you know what WinLinks is. It's RS Links, it's Factory Talk Links. Yep. And then they had the WinLogix 5, which was the kind of the eye-popping thing. You mean I can program my Allen Bradley PLC on Windows 3.1? Are you kidding me? This is like, because it's new, it's fresh, it's not just character based, it's graphics, it's Windows, it's Windows on top of each other. I can have I can leave my instruction toolbar floating over here, and I can have my data table floating over here, and it's just this whole new way of writing code, right? And easy to learn for newer people. The drag and drop windows, and guess what? You can alt tab or minimize it and open up your email, because people were starting to get email in the mid-90s, and you can alt tab and open up your spreadsheet. Maybe it's Lotus 123, maybe it's Microsoft. I had Microsoft Works at home, which was kind of like a combination of Word and Excel and Publisher, but
miniature office.
Yeah, it was a miniature office, and it was like $89 for home use. It was great, but long story short, I think they saw the power of Windows, and they made the right bet, because when the Windows 95 came out, it was like, yeah, this is the future. But what the story I wanted to tell, though, is I think a big part. This is what they told us. This is what ICOM told us. Okay, I was in a Wintelligent training class. Rockwell had already announced they were buying them, and Rockwell came in and showed the RS View, which was just it was like somebody showing you Wonderware for the first time, right? It just blew away WinView. It was just leaps but not the trending, but everything else was just leaps and bounds above. It was next generation Windows stuff, right? And it came out with some bugs. I'm still a huge fan of the software, and it still lives on today. It's Factory Talk View, both for your panel view and for your SCADA system. But that is when ICOM said, yeah, they've leapfrogged us on the Wonderware style HMI software. So that was a good time for them to sell, not just for Rockwell to buy. But I digress a little bit. I'll throw it back to you guys.
RS View, I think, was a third-party supplied product from Dynapro Auto. I think, because it was an extension of Advisor PC.
Well, the way we were
So,
explaining to it was a 50-50. I think the panel views were a 50-50 joint run share. I do believe if you look at RS View, the original versions did say have a credit to Dynapro, but
yeah.
Rockwell wanted to be the sole. And I invite anybody to come on to tell me I'm wrong. But if I remember correctly, unlike the panel view where the original panel views, which were like kind of like a 50-50 thing with Dynapro and Rockwell, the RS View, even though Dynapro had a lot of development in it, Rockwell said, we want this to be our product. It's going to be a Rockwell software product. And so and for years they had the Dynapro. Eventually I heard that they ended up buying Dynapro out at some point.
I think they
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. So the Dynapro was lost. I don't know if it was version 5 or what version it was they bought them out, but you wouldn't see Dynapro in the and I think they were in Vancouver. But yeah, a lot of the panel view stuff came. I think it was Dynapro an industrial PC company.
The T30 came from Dynapro,
Yep.
I believe, and the initial panel views did it, I believe, as well.
Yeah, the T30 was a strange animal. We'll have to have a show just on that. But getting get it back to the DOS software. So let's put a range on this. I think the DOS software died or was on its deathbed in 95.
I wouldn't disagree.
Windows 95 came out. We're seeing the writing on the wall. DOS is going away. Did it go away right away? But I would say by 2000, it was mostly gone. The birth of the DOS software, we thinking 85, 84, 85, 83? When do you, because it had to be out by 86, because that was the only way you could program a PLC 5.
85 is when the IPDS was out. I would probably suggest 84, 85 would be a pretty reasonable start date for, and I know that Taylor started back then, but it was strictly documentation. There wasn't any programming software. Their initial product was documentation. And then they went into online and offline programming. So because Zycom was available, early 80s with CPM for documentation system, $25,000 just so that you could print it out on a printer. And I think that necessity is the mother of invention. Thank you. And I think people just started to see things. And, well, we can do that because now we've got a PC, right? We've got DOS, and all we need to do is have an interface. And there was the WordStar was around for word processing. There's a Canadian company that built word processor hardware. I can't remember the name of those guys, but I think, the early 80s, after the PC was created, it just got juices flowing. And, well, we can do that. We can do this. And, to try to find people to program was obviously harder then than it is now, but you find the right people, maybe you put them through some training. But the products that were coming out in the 80s, I mean, they were coming out fast and furious. And I think, again, the Windows-based stuff we're using today is strictly just a step upwards from where we are, right?
Sorry, guys. I'm trying to get there we go. Sorry. Right.
And we have the, we've got the same feature list, except now it's a right click. Instead of Alt-C, it's a right click from a context-sensitive menu. It's drag the mouse to select a range instead of shift down, 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 But fundamentally, everything that's in a Windows-based product now is or does come from the genesis of DOS-based programming software. And the cool thing about having 6, 7, 8 companies developing for one product line is the innovation that happened back then was off the freaking charts. The basics of programming languages for PLC development, you could put on a single piece of paper, but you're going to need 4 or 5 additional pieces of paper for all of the innovation that happened, for all the different people that were involved in the development of the industry during the time of 85 to 95.
And I think
It was
that
just
leads us.
fascinating.
I think that leads us into next week's episode we'll be recording, where we talk about the changes in what originally was 1131-3, now it's 61131-3, and if you're a Rockwell user, you may not even know what that is, and Rockwell is a lot like Apple or other name brand companies that they take care of their customers, and so Rockwell doesn't embrace IEC 61131-3 because a lot of its instructions predate the standard. And their customers have been using XIC, LTE, XIO since the late 60s. So why would you change it to a normally open or normally closed contact or a coil now, when your customer, your people grew up using something else? But I do think we see in Europe the IEC 61131 standard has really fostered an explosion of growth, and I think that's coming to America. But we'll talk about that next week. And I want to just do final thoughts here, and I'll turn it over to Gary for your final thoughts for this week.
My final thought is a question: is there a single person or company that deserves credit for Ladder Logic? Yeah, when we think of DOS program, we think, okay, Bill Gates, Paul Allen, WordStar. So somebody invented Ladder Logic. Just throwing that out, or maybe that'll be a topic. We'll go to Wikipedia.
I think Jeremy can answer that, because the first real PLC competition, only one of the 3 PLCs programmed in ladder logic. The Allen Bradley really was 3i, was mnemonics, right? XICOTE.
In Matrix.
Yeah, and so if you the Matrix. So Jeremy knows or knew, because he's since passed away, Dick Morley, who was he the president of the company at the time when they created the first Modicon PLC?
It was Bedford's Associates, and I think, again, going from memory, due to conversation, I think they're like George Swank. Maybe
I don't think Dick Morley was it. No, I don't think it was. I don't think it was Dick Morley.
I don't think so either.
He was the tech genius.
It was just a tech guy.
He was the engineer
graduate.
Just the tech guy.
Yeah.
But I think it was his idea to go that route. Well, his and the customers.
Well, yeah, the customers came to Bedford, and said, "This is what we're looking for." And as history goes, he was hung over on a New Year's Day, and he sketched it out on the back of a napkin, and then went to the Bedford Associate team, which is the team with the picture that's in front of the 084.
Yep.
And said, "This is my idea for this." And there was another guy who was the firmware guy. He was the software guy. I've emailed with him as well before, and I'm trying to remember his name. He would be a blast to have come on and talk about the early days of Modicon. And he takes a lot of credit for the 084's feature list. Was it going to be in the operating system, right?
Yeah, and I would love to have him on and pick his brain and find out what really happened. But as the story goes, the 3i, which is the company Rockwell bought and was invested, they were working with a group that did a lot of computer-based stuff. And so, they were like, "We love mnemonics. We can put a string of mnemonics in there. Great." Whereas the folks that Dick and Bedford and Associates were working for, they were those guys who, like, we use all relay logic. We're going to replace it with this standard machine controller. And I think, after that, everybody's like, yeah, people are going to want to program in ladder logic. They're not going to want to. They want it to look like relay ladder logic. The diagrams they use to document the actual relay interwiring, and not computer code.
They didn't want it to be an order of magnitude difference.
Yeah,
they wanted that to be an incremental change, if you will, or an incremental step.
They wanted to put their top electricians on the terminal and let them program.
Yeah, as but it also had to be recognizable. And one of the things that I remember Dick saying is that everybody forgets about the 3 a.m. call when the machine's down and who's going to fix it. And so the focus was on the fix-it guys, the maintenance guys. That was the focus from the initial development, if you will.
Yeah. You can imagine saying you have this panel of relays and saying we're going to replace it with something electronic. And the guys who are responsible at 3 o'clock in the morning for making sure this works are going to be like, you're going to train me on this. I'm going to know this inside and out. Because they ain't going to.
Everybody says, I can't remember if we talked about this before, but I'm a little fed up with people sitting there thinking you can use structured text for everything. It's kind of like
that is a big European influence on that. But I think we should, and I'm as frustrated as you with that, but I think we should save that for another show. Any final words, anybody else?
Thank you very much. I will see you next Sunday, hopefully.
Before I stop recording, I just want to wish everybody a great week. And until next time, my friends, peace